Welcome! Thank you so much for joining me on the Socially Delightful podcast. I'm Jewel, human connection enthusiast and your host, and this show is all about delighting in yourself, delighting in socializing and in others, and creating truly supportive, delightful friendships and relationships, even in our modern world with our modern stress. In this podcast, we have fun creating a new culture of living in social delight. Now let's dive into how we're going to do that today. Awesome. Okay. Welcome everybody. Welcome Rochelle. Now, I wanted to ask my friend Rochelle to be on this episode because I absolutely adore her. And I think we are such a great example of you don't have to be in the same life stages to be friends. Rochelle has become such a dear friend to me, and she literally has a daughter around my age. And our friendship to me just feels it feels the same as it would with anybody else. The connection, the bond is there. And so I really wanted to have you on for that reason, but not just for that reason. I wanted to have you because you are somebody that is always blowing my mind with the way that you care for other people, the way that you care for yourself, and your emotional intelligence. So Rochelle is just somebody that loves life. She's so fun, and you have really deeply met yourself. I love this quote of people can only meet you as far as they have met themselves. And Rochelle is somebody who's really deeply met all parts of herself and encourages me to do that every single time I'm with her. So today we're going to be talking about expectations in friendship, but I'm just so excited. And a little bit about Rochelle. Oh, I'm making her a little teary. I love you.
It's perfect.
We love it. The social delight, the connection. And just a little bit about Rochelle. Rochelle is a money coach. And that is actually how I met her. So, Rochelle, if you're open to, would you like to talk a little bit about your work in the world?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here. I always love talking to you. So, also, this is the launch week as we're recording this, and I am through 2.5 episodes, and I really love what you're doing here. I think it's so important, and I admire you so much, knowing what it is you want to do and insisting that you're going to show up in the world doing that thing. So,
thank you.
Really want to acknowledge you for that. I'm a money coach for life coaches and other heart-centered, purpose-driven business owners. I've taken to saying lately that they're sort of accidental. They're I never thought I wanted to be a business owner, but then I fell in love with this thing that I know I need to do. And the only way for me to do it is to own my own business because it's not offered in any other traditional work setting. And I think that was true for you.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and I know for sure that their work in the world is more sustainable when their money is in place. And so I help them really dare to dream big and to be very specific about what it is that they desire and allow themselves to want the things that they want and not the things that people expect them to want. And as we do that, we paint this picture of what do I want my life to look and feel like? And then later, how does the money fit in there? How do I set up habits and routines that support the things that I know that I want so that I automatically get them at the end of the day? I've made my decisions, I've set up my routines, this is happening. We do that for their personal finances. And then from there, we go into their business finances. At the end of the day, the only reason we have a business, we would do the work anyway, but the reason we made it a business is so that we can pay ourselves and do fun things at home. So I always start at home and then work it into the business. And the last layer is always around what am I not able to pay for in my business or in my personal life that I want, so that I can up level there, so that there's personal revenue goals that are really connected to the life that you want to look and feel and love. And how do you continuously be content with what you have, love what you have, and grow into what you want.
So good. So good. Amazing. Rochelle is so good at what she does, y'all. I know from personal experience. Um, so I think too today I picked some stories that have to deal with like money and stuff like that. But I wanted you honestly, and I guess I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but I want you to come back and for us to do like friendship and money stuff on its own. So now that I said it in this recording, I mean, I could cut this, but now that I said it, I guess you're kind of pressured to come back.
Oh my gosh. When we first talked about this, you're like, I hope you come back multiple times. I'm like, yes, I hope you invite me multiple
Yeah,
times. Yes.
I definitely will. Today, we're just going to be talking about like expectations in friendships. And so, I just want to preface this too before we jump into some of the stories. I'm going to be sharing like from friendship knowledge. But y'all, everything is such a case by case situation. So, like, we might say something here for like one particular situation, and like your situation might be similar, but it's not that exact situation, right? Like, so trust your own judgment. Like, we are coming from an informed place, but we're not, it's not law, right? So trust yourself. But also, I just know too, like knowing Rochelle's background and all of the certifications and things that you've done, and knowing that about myself too. Like, I also love when you and I get together because we say things sometimes and I'm like, wow, we articulated this like complicated or complex dynamic philosophy in such a beautiful way. So I'm really excited to have that come out through the stories, and I think it's going to be so helpful as far as like expectations of your friends go. So good. I'm so excited. So I am going to pull up our first story here. Okay, are you ready?
I am.
Awesome. Okay, so this one is coming from the best of Redditor updates, and here it is. So, one of my work colleagues is a lifelong friend of mine. We live on the same street growing up, we went to the same school, and when I needed a job after graduating university, she made me aware of an opening at the company she worked at. I applied, got the job, and it's been quite a few years, and we still work together. It's a pretty small company and quite male dominated, so after we started working together, we became really close. We take all our lunches together, we regularly stop by each other's offices or our desks for a chat. We quickly became known around the office as inseparable. A year ago, she got engaged to her long term partner, and I was ecstatic for her. She had a really tough time a couple of years ago, two family deaths close together, and I did everything I could to be a good friend to her while she was in the worst stages of grieving. She cried with me daily for weeks, and I made sure she knew I was always available to listen. I also took about a third of her workload off her voluntarily so she could take days off when she needed to without stressing about her work building up. So now that life has gotten better for her and she's always smiling and excited, it's really nice to see. Ever since she got engaged, as expected, she's talked a lot about wedding plans, especially at our lunches. I know basically every detail. When she booked her venue, she was really excited, but she refused to tell me where it was going to be, saying that she wanted it to be a surprise for when the invitations came out. The wedding is 2 weeks away now, and I've long since stopped waiting for my invitation to show up. I know when they were sent because she told me all about delivering them, and she shows me every day the gifts that people have started to buy off the registry. I felt silly for saying it, but the more I think about it, the more hurt I feel that I haven't been included. It's a big wedding, and she has invited some other people from work that I didn't even know she was close to. She hasn't mentioned the reason why I'm not invited, and at this point, I feel too awkward to ask. I guess it's just a slap in the face because I really thought we were close, and now I'm realizing that maybe we're not. Since all of this, I've started to really examine our friendship, and I'm wondering if she even cares about me at all. I could think of 100 examples where I helped her work through decisions, listened to her vent, stood up for her when she had issues with colleagues, even tons of little things like if anyone brings in cake as she's out of the office, I always make sure to save her a slice so she doesn't miss out. But I can't remember a time when she did anything for me in return. Now when she talks to me, I've realized she doesn't even listen to me. When I finish talking, she just carries on with what she was saying before, almost as if I'd never spoken at all. If we were talking about me or something I've been doing, she never has anything to say. She just kind of nods and then switches the conversation back to herself. I've started to think she couldn't care less about me. She just likes having someone around who she can talk to, and whoever that person is, it doesn't really matter to her. I've invested so many years into this friendship, it's cut me really deep. I feel used. It's also made being at work incredibly lonely because she's my only friend. I've stopped having lunch with her. At any time she tries to chat, I politely bring the conversation to a quick end and get back to work. She doesn't she doesn't appear to even have noticed. I do wish her well, and I'm glad that her life turned around so she's happy, but I'm a bit lost. I'm not sure if I'm being too harsh because I'm hurt, or if I even have the right to be hurt in the first place, as I know weddings have a finite number of guests, and you have to leave people out that you would invite in an ideal world. I'm not sure there's any going back from this either. Has anyone had a similar experience? Am I being unreasonable or overdramatic? Or should I just let the dust settle and then see how I feel then? So that's where we're at. That one was long.
First of all, I want to be your friend, OP. You sound amazing. Everybody should have a work bestie like you, honestly. And I have a work bestie, and that we also had lunch together every single day. And yeah, so just listening to that totally like brings me back to that. Like, it's like a very special, specific kind of friendship. So I really just want to say I value that, and I see you and I appreciate you in that. I am just not sure that you didn't get invited or if your invitation got lost, honestly.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
I don't know how we would know, but
Yeah. Yeah, because there is no like mention of her communicating that or asking. So,
and the
right? It could
fact that she
go ahead.
said like I want it to be a surprise when the invitations go out, like that's not really something you say to somebody that's not going to get an invitation.
Yeah, I forgot about that. You're so right. Like that would be so cruel. Oh my gosh, like you're gonna be so surprised, and then like surprised you're not invited. That's so true. Like even if this person was like, if you will, like because the way that OP kind of describes his friend is like, oh, I do all of these things for her. She doesn't do these things for me. Even if this friend, was like that, I don't. You'd have to be a real big old meanie to just be like, you're gonna be surprised when the invitations go out, and then to not send one.
Especially other people in the office are invited. It'd be different if no other people in the office were invited. Then maybe she could be a little bit more assured that she's not invited. But I mean, I don't know. It's like such this hard, and I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But it can take a while to sort of like grow into that capacity to be able to like have a conversation. I think so many of our actually this quote came up for me while you were talking, and I don't know if it's I don't know who said it. It's more like a meme that I seen, but it says between what is meant and not said and said but not meant, so much love is lost,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And
Yep.
oftentimes that is like the why behind the why behind the why of saying something you didn't mean and meaning something but not saying it is not being comfortable with your own capacity for that vulnerability or that disappointment
Mm-hmm.
that might occur. Like, I totally understand being like, I don't want to ask her if I'm invited because if she says no, I might burst out in tears or I might, have a face or it might be a confrontation. I totally get that. But I just can't tell. I just can't with what she's given, I cannot imagine that she's not invited.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree. That quote is so golden too. I'll give like a real life example, and I'm gonna call out my own friend group for a second. One of my friends, yeah, has kids, and so what's happened before, and this is not all the time. Like we love her kids. She's the only one out of this little friend group that has kids. We love her kids, and like there was a time where like somebody was hosting a get together, and they were like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Like, I I know I'm pretty sure she has like her kids that weekend, and I don't know like if I want kids to be there. I think I might want like alcohol around, and right, like it would just be nice to like relax. Like, how do I tell her that I don't want her kids there, because I also don't want her to think that I never want her kids there. I don't want her to be uncomfortable. And I was like, great, just say that. Just say that. Right? Just tell the full truth. I don't want you to feel this way. We want your kids at other times. It's just this one event. We just want it to be like adult friendly. So, yes, I love that quote so much. I also think what's really interesting about this one is two things. One, she felt, it seems like, really connected with this friend until this happened, and then she started almost like she put on some glasses and was literally like, oh my gosh, I'm only seeing all of the ways that this friend doesn't care about me or doesn't invest in me and so on. And that happens so often. So I wonder if, like, it just seems like she's in a very protective place right now. I need to protect myself, protect my energy, which makes sense. Um, Especially, like you said, if she's not comfortable, like, being vulnerable and talking to this girl about it. But I just think it's interesting that she only really started to feel that way after this happened. And I think that happens a lot for a lot of people. If we were just more honest, if we just said things, right, and things that we meant more often, like, I care about this friendship and I'm confused why you didn't invite me to your wedding. Like, can we talk about that a little bit? Like, that right there, it's vulnerable to do that. But I think a lot of times, especially as women, we don't think we can confront, because we think confronting a conversation like that is almost like aggressive somehow, or like, I don't know, like, we just think of like confronting or having those conversations as like such a big deal, but that's not a big deal. Just to be okay, I don't want to say it's not a big deal, like you don't can't have feelings around it. That's not what I mean. But what I mean is, like, it doesn't have to be a confront. It can just be like a casual conversation. If you're coming at it too from like, hey, I really care about our friendship. I'm just confused. But you're right, that's vulnerable, because you have to be willing to maybe feel a little embarrassed or be willing to feel rejected and know that you're going to be okay with yourself afterwards. And it doesn't sound like this person has that ability. So I think you're right on there. It's like trying to give herself like permission, like, oh, is this a good enough reason to be hurt? The point is, you're hurt. Even if you thought it was ridiculous, I'm trying to think of like a really dumb example, but like, there's been dumb things that like I have quote unquote been upset over, but the truth is, like, even then I was upset over it. Like, so yesterday I launched the podcast, dropped the podcast, so many things went wrong. So many things, like little things about it. It was messy. And I found myself like crying over like a little thing that happened. And like, the truth of the matter is, that feeling was already present. It was in my body. It was there. Like, you're allowed to be hurt by that. So I wonder too, what would change for this OP if she was just a little bit more like, so I am hurt by this. That giving it like that, like a soft acknowledgement, if you will. And like, yeah. Yeah, what do you think about that? I see your head nodding.
Yeah, I really agree with you. This place where it's like the validation for what you're already feeling. Like, babe, that makes a lot of sense, right? Like, this is touching this specific wound of mine and it hurts and I feel rejected and I feel, right? Like, allowing yourself to feel all the things that you do already feel instead of asking for permission, but really like validating. So I have this 3-step process that I use when I self-coach myself, and then also I'm teaching my clients to use it. And it's actually a combination of all the different like certifications that you mentioned earlier. But I think that validation piece, that one that's like, ooh, that makes a lot of sense, and like, damn, that hurt, right? And just like, I'm just gonna like comfort that physical sensation. I'm not gonna ask anybody else if it's okay that I feel this way. I'm just gonna be like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and this really hurts, and I want to soothe myself. The second step is then information. Like, why does this make so much sense socially and culturally? Like, what is the background? What is the origin? What are the different intersectional things that come into play here that maybe don't come into play for this person, but they do come into play for me? Or why is it that I think that a wedding is so important? Like, what's the big deal if I get invited or not, right? Like, really finding like those informational, like, origin, historical sort of like remnants, and then laying them on the table. It's sort of like, this is the stage where it's like dumping out your purse and just like going through it and just like, okay, this is what's in here and this is what's in here. And I can see over here I have tied up that this means this, and like maybe it doesn't mean that. And then from there, we're in the exploration stage, right? So validation, information, and now we can explore, like, how do I want to feel? What's a more creative solution? How can I come at this now that I'm calm and I'm centered? And you're right, it sounds like when we're asking people, is it okay for me to feel this way? We don't have that like centered, soft place to land in ourselves.
Yes. Yes. So good. So well said. One thing that I am really big on is we need to practice like feeling connection more in our bodies, because so many of us in this world, like, this is why the podcast exists, because so many of us in this world are lonely, are not having the meaningful bonds that we want to have. We, are in an epidemic of loneliness. We have a culture truly of isolation. And so for a lot of us, like, feeling connection in our bodies has become unfamiliar. So, like, to feel that connection and to choose it and to think that way, same thing goes for confidence, right? Like, oh, I'm going to think about myself as a confident person. But we can't do that, in my humble opinion, until we have acknowledged and seen compassionately the ways that maybe we're insecure or the ways that we are lonely. Truly, what made me feel so confident to, if you will, like, I, in episode 2, I like quote unquote target 2 of my best friends and I like go after them and I made them my friends, which I know you listen to, which is so fun. But what made me feel confident enough and connected enough to do that was also like being like, yeah, I'm feeling lonely, and like treating myself with softness. Because the truth of the matter is, like, whether you give that feeling permission or not, it's there. It's in your body. You're feeling it. Those sensations are already here, right? And you don't have to love the reason why you're feeling that way. Like, again, even yesterday, I kind of laughed at myself. Like, something really small with the podcast launch happened, and I started crying, and I was like, oh man, like, this is goofy to like be like upset about, but I wasn't also being like, oh, I shouldn't be upset about this. This is wrong. I don't know if I should feel this way. It was like that tender moment of, I do feel this way. I'm going to be here for myself. And so I love that, what you said, so much, because I really think this person would really benefit from that. And it makes me sad that, she's hurt, one, in this situation, but two, that she's like really trying to like figure out if she's quote unquote like justified. And I think a lot of us do that. I think it's also very common in our culture. It's something I'm always like coaching people on. And like, I think it's like a response that we have of like, oh, is this like worthy enough to be upset over? Like, but yeah, it's super interesting.
And even
So, oh, go
just
ahead.
that there's even a thread that's like, am I the asshole?
Yeah.
I mean, I get it, and it's fun, and they're fun to read, right? But also, you and I had another conversation. I was like, I don't know if I'm doing this right, because I'm not able to pick an asshole. I'm always just
Yeah.
like, but also be gentle with yourself. I want to say this really, really clearly. I am 45 years old, and I just learned these like in the last few years. And so I think all the time about what a different life I would have had I had these tools and known these things before. But I didn't know before, right? And now that I do, I talk about them openly. I share them in hopes that somebody will get something a little bit earlier than I did, and they'll be able to like take that with them. But one of the things that I learned in the last few years was working with a friend of mine who is a somatica coach. She taught me a repair process that I use for self-coaching all of the time now. And that it's a 10-step process, but it's really interesting because if you do it, I don't want to say correctly, but if you do it like connectedly, right? Like,
Ooh, so good.
what you'll learn is the apology or the action of the person is almost irrelevant if you do the other steps. So those first steps are like acknowledging that you are triggered or activated. I never in my life has anybody ever asked me, are you triggered or activated by something right now? Never. I just walked around feeling dysregulated since I was a child. And then my brain went and made up stories that like sounded as terrible as my body felt. And I just
So
took
true.
those stereotypes. I just lived out that life like, well, this must be the story about me. And if I would have known there was such a thing as dysregulation in my body, and I could like comfort myself, I could breathe, I could like rub my chest, I could like tap my chest bone. Like there's all kinds of things that I can do to bring myself back into regulation. Then I can think from a calm and creative place. I'm going to come up with a completely different story. So knowing that, number one. Number two, the recommendation is phenomenal in that if you're triggered above a 2 or a 3, don't even continue to have the repair conversation. Now
Yeah.
think about that. Most of us don't even admit that we're angry until we're at an 8 or a 9.
Hmm.
So like 0 is not bothered at all, right? So a 2 or a 3 is like, you really have to be dialed in and paying attention to yourself to understand that you're triggered, which that awareness in itself is gold. And then from there, it's like, here's what happened, and here's the wound that it touched, and here's the desire I feel, and here's why it's really important to me. It's not about like, you did this, and I need you to do this thing differently next time so I don't feel that way. It's, I felt rejected.
Yeah.
Rejection is really a deep wound for me. I really need you to understand the rejection piece, the piece that was so hurt, right? Now, I need to understand it before I need somebody else to understand it. But anyway, if you have those 3 steps in your repair process, you're so much further ahead of the game.
Yeah.
And it almost doesn't matter if somebody else is sorry, if somebody else does something differently. If
Hmm.
you can understand, this is why I'm so activated, this is the wound that it's touching, and this is what I need. You can give it
Yeah.
to me if you want to after I tell you. If it's not going to be you, then I now know that I need to fully resource myself in that thing anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that so much. I offer something like it's almost this, it's basically the same. It's the same in the program. Uh, but I love that so much. I love that you're it takes practice and like learning these tools to like really integrate it. But I also want to say too, it never goes away. Like your brain will always, like the primitive emotional lizard part of you will always have an emotional reaction first, and then like you come in right after. Like one of my favorite things to explain to clients is that their amygdala is the first thing that gets activated, and then the amygdala sends and it's super quick, sends messages to the body. So like if we're anxious, the amygdala is activated, and then we have increased heart rate, right? We might be sweaty, and just to run away or do whatever we need to do. And then your prefrontal cortex, the conscious part of you, comes in like a whole second or more later, and that matters. It matters. So I love that so much too, because that applies, I think, for life, for the rest of life. Like I'm feeling activated, like what's going on with me, and like I see that, I'm tending to that, and then I can go handle the rest of it. I love that so much. So this one is still really long, and I didn't know that. I wanted to make sure we had both of us had genuine reactions. So she has 2 edits here. One, just to clarify a few things that have been asked a lot or requested to be put in. She hand delivered the invites to people at work, so I know it hasn't been lost in the post. I haven't been able to ask her about it. She puts, because I'm a total doormat and scared of difficult conversations. And 3, I invited her to my wedding, but that was years ago, and it's possible she thinks things have changed since then. Edit 2, Aw, she like, thanks everybody for being kind to her. We love that. And that she read every comment. Love. She said, the opinion seems to be divided on whether or not I should confront the wedding invitation issue or just let it go. I'm definitely going to make sure that it isn't a mistake. But as far as for getting an explanation of why she didn't invite me, I'm undecided. I'm going to have a think about that and the best way to proceed, but your thoughts have all been really helpful. In terms of our friendship in general, I'm not going to be too hasty to write it off. I'm going to try put my feelings aside and see if I'm right about it being one-sided. If it is, then I will have learned a good life lesson, and if I see it as worth saving, then I will have to deal with that the best way I can. It does seem the bigger issue here is my non-confrontational approach to relationships. Some of your comments are hard to read, but only because I know you're right and that this is something I have to change. I've withdrawn from friendships before because they hurt me and I've felt unable to say anything, and that's not really fair. Which I love that she says that it's not fair. Like, being in a relationship and a friendship, you're gonna hurt each other. But anyway, like that happens. It's okay. She goes on to say, it's a general problem I have with uncomfortable conversations. Whenever I have to have them, I basically descend into panic. My mouth goes dry, I shake, and I can't find the right words to say. If it's a bad enough problem that I can't ask a good friend for a simple question, that I can't ignore it anymore and I need to work on this. I think I read that wrong, but it's okay. Thank you for pointing this out to me. I'm going to find a way to get better at it. And then we have an update. So she says, so it took me a few days to decide the best way to approach this, but yesterday I had lunch with her again and had the conversation. I started by saying, so you've sent all your invitations out now, haven't you? And she looked immediately panicked by my question, and I knew right away that she didn't want me to go down this road. When she said she had sent them all, I asked if that meant she could show me her venue now. She showed me the website of it, including the photo gallery, and talked me through all about where everything was going to happen, all the flower decorations that she was going to add, etc. It was a nice enough country hotel with some pretty gardens, but I'm not sure what all the secrecy was for. I probed a little bit more, asking who she invited from work. The list didn't include me, and I said I was looking forward to seeing the photos so that I could see how everything looked. She didn't correct me that I would see it on the day. Then I was completely sure that my lack of invitation wasn't an accident. She looked relieved when I switched the subject and asked if she's excited about her honeymoon and having a rest from all the wedding stress. So I'm definitely not invited. I thought it over carefully and decided not to ask her why for 3 reasons. The reason is it's fairly obvious. She clearly doesn't think we're anything more than colleagues, and I've misread the situation. There were some other theories suggested, example, jealous, husband-to-be associating me with her past grief, but considering everything I know about her and her history, I'm not sure that it's that. I'm not sure why she didn't cool it on the wedding talk with someone she had no intention of inviting, or even just bring it up with me and explain why I'm not invited, but never mind. Having an awkward relationship at work is the last thing I want. I'm worried that if I push this and turn it into an issue, that I'll look pathetic or needy, or that it'll be unprofessional. I also run the risk of her bad-mouthing me to colleagues and mutual friends, and I find it much easier and less messy to handle my own feelings quietly. This is a once-in-a-lifetime experience for her, and I don't want to be the source of all the drama that dampens her spirits and all. I'd rather just let her enjoy her wedding and make good memories and not bring her down. And I'm fine with not going. It was never really about being invited to the wedding. It was more about having to face the fact that I have been naive and take it for granted, and I felt silly that I invested so much into this relationship. That's not all on her because she was never obligated to be my friend. Talking it through in this post really helped me work through my feelings. I went back to work on Monday and I felt much calmer and detached from it emotionally. I have looked back on our whole relationship, and honestly, she's always been self-involved, entitled. Being a bride has just made it more obvious, but it's always been there. She's also never given back to me besides helping me get the job, which is, of course, I'm grateful for, in that she's never been willing to talk to me through any problems I've had, although I've happily helped her with work. She says no if I ask her for help in return. And it goes on a little bit, like, I'm actually really surprised But the too long didn't read is, so definitely not invited. Our friendship is likely over, but that's okay. And I'm going to work on my assertiveness so that I can handle things like this better next time. Which I think is good. So, how do you feel about that? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think too, like, I'm sorry for her heartbreak. I will say, I went on a trip, a girls' trip, with a certification class that I was in, and we were in France, and we are like driving around in this like passenger van, and everybody's talking about their friends and their friend groups, and like that falling out, like everybody had a story. So I just want to say it feels terrible, and like it's personal and like deliberate and about you when it happens to you. But I think the thing that I walked away with from that conversation was like, oh, we all have this, right? So I just want to really like recognize and acknowledge we all have friendships that have fallen apart. I think she is, I mean, really impressive, because what this brought up for her is like, here's where my hole was. Here's how I want to fill it. Here's the reasons why I actually don't want to have the discussion about the wedding, because being invited to the wedding wouldn't change anything for me. These things would still bother me, right? So this is like what we call know your reasons, like your reasons. And I think she did a phenomenal job with that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think she really checked in with herself. Like, I mean, you can tell she's like writing the post that she's kind of doing what we talked about earlier. Like, she's like softly acknowledging, like, oh, this is why I felt that way and why. And like, this is so, like, you can tell she's processing as she's writing the post. And so I'm really glad that she came to Reddit and allowed herself that space to just acknowledge, like, oh, I'm hurt and this is why. Because you can tell even as she's like going through, like, this is okay, this is okay, because I don't want people to like listen to this episode and be like, because like, this is a lot of people's biggest fear, is that I'm going to feel this way about somebody and they're not going to feel that way about me. And especially as women, we really prioritize, like data shows, research shows, we really prioritize mutual prioritization. However, that on some level is a little bit of a fantasy. And I want to be really clear about that, because it doesn't mean you can't expect people to prioritize you the way you do them. But here's how I want everyone to think about it. Data shows, I got this from Danielle Jackson. Oh my gosh, I love her. She is the one that taught me about this. But research shows that 50% of our relationships are reciprocal. So, what does that mean? That means that 50% of our relationships match up as far as reprioritizing. It doesn't mean people don't like fully like reciprocate, but as far as mutual prioritization goes, we're only matched 50%. Now, before anybody hears that and freaks out and is like, oh my gosh, I prioritize people that don't prioritize me. Oh, that's such a problem. You're doing it too. You're doing that to other people too. Like, it's 50%. Like, it goes the other way as well. Like, there are people that are prioritizing you, that you are not them. And it doesn't mean anything about our worthiness or our personalities or anything like that. All that it means is sometimes we have friendship structures in place. And that's the beautiful thing about friendship compared to partnerships, is it allows to ebb and flow. I think part of the reason why this particular situation was painful for OP was because they mentioned, I don't have a lot of other connections, right? Like, there are connection gaps there. And that's, again, a huge reason why I'm doing this podcast, is because that's so many of us. I also just want to like quickly touch on, I do think this situation is a little different though. Like, there's a line for everybody. I do think for this person, you know, doesn't, it's not that they just don't like feel connected or supported by this person anymore, but this friend has like actively shown, hey, you're not a priority to me. And sometimes, I know, here's the thing, I'm hesitant to say this because I know somebody out there is going to hear this and be like, yeah, my friend didn't do the exact same thing for me on my birthday that I did for hers. Like, she doesn't prioritize me. It's a case by case situation. But I think in this particular case, this friend showed, hey, like, it's not important for me to be there for you in other ways, including this wedding. And I think this is a situation where it's like, okay, now who else do I want to prioritize and make new friendship habits around?
So much goodness there. So, I mean, one thing I would point out is like part of the gift in this is seeing. I'm a money coach, right? But we're seeing where her investments are not spread out, right? And she's
Yeah.
investing all of her eggs in this one friendship basket. So, of course, it feels like, well, why wouldn't you invite me? I'm your only friend. It's like, no, you're her only friend, right? Like vice versa, right?
Yep.
And
So
we are
true.
always the main character in our narrative. so so again, like you were talking about reciprocal, and I'm a big believer actually in even romantic partnerships. This idea that they're going to be reciprocated like 50-50, it's like sometimes it's going to be 20-80, sometimes it's going to be 100-0.
Right.
And that's in like committed partnerships where you're like, hey, you and I were doing this thing together, right? So like friendships, even like shakier about like what can you expect for reciprocation. And so I really think the idea of what do I get from feeling connected to you versus what do you do for me if I
Yeah.
did this, right? First of all, like you've already pointed out, our brain filters out all the things people do for us. It like highlights and underlines all the things we do for other people, but it like
Mm-hmm.
totally filters out. We have no idea. Also, like it's very possible that this particular coworker never did save her a piece of cake and never did like all of those things. I'm not like contesting that. Especially because I want to be really compassionate to her right now. I know she's feeling a lot
Yeah.
of rejection. Um, so all of that could be true, and also maybe not. And just like allowing ourselves to have some space of like, okay, I might be filtering some of this out, or I might be seeing this through a different color lens. Um, One great example is when we're feeling sick or hurt or emotional or hormonal, like there's all kinds of external things that can affect how easily it is for us to access negative thoughts and feelings. And I also like just really want to point that out because when it's sunny and things are going well and I feel like skipping, almost never do I have a negative thought about somebody doing something for me, right?
Yeah.
But if I'm sick, I'm like, these people suck, like, or if it's cloudy or, right? So just notice what external factors do sort of filter your lenses.
Yes.
And again, like, have awareness for it. Don't make yourself wrong for it, but maybe don't like jump on the cloud and go for a ride on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I like that. And I think too the last thing I want to say, because I know this is such a fear so many people have. And it's a fear because it's like, oh, then I'm gonna make it mean something about who I am. But also they think that they're gonna be in pain from this forever. And I really think we can see it, and honestly, it's so long. But this person goes on to explain, I did not know how long this was when I originally found it, the updates and everything, but this person goes on to be like, and I'm working on this. And she even says like, oh, healthy friendships are having a balance, and like I can do like there's like stuff in here you can tell where she again is like starting to process, and I'm so glad to see that because also rejection isn't like forever. There might be like a tenderness, but truly some of my biggest rejections have been some of the most empowering and confident moments of my life because it's like, oh wow, I faced that hurt and I'm good. Like truly, I'm gonna tell this story eventually. I've just been teasing it in recent episodes, but I had this situation where I had a friend's mom like make fun of me, and that didn't feel good. That felt rejected. But and I mean this with my whole body, my whole heart. Like that moment became so empowering for me because of the way I treated myself in that emotion. It felt like I could do anything after that. And it kind of reminds me, there's the scariest hike in America. It's called Angel's Landing. It's in, gosh, I hope I'm not going to say it wrong, but I think it's Zion. Okay, wait. So it's in Zion, and when I did that hike, every part of it, because it's just like you're walking and there's just a drop off. Like there, you have to hold a chain to like stay on there. It's terrifying. And every time I went up there, I was like, my God, like after feeling that intense emotion and like again being like, okay, we're gonna do this. When I got off of that mountain and got done with that hike, I was like, wow, I could really do anything. And I truly think the moments of rejection in my life have also been like that. But I want to make sure we get to other stories. So good.
Can I just like one thing, because I think this is really
Yes.
interesting about the 7 years when you mentioned like every 7 years friendships change. They also have the same statistics around romantic partnerships. But also, did you know that the cells in your body die off and regenerate every 7 years, right?
What is up with seven?
Well, I mean, again, I'm woo curious. I'm not like that knowledgeable about energy, but I'm interested in energy, right? And so when we think about our bodies as masses of energy and know, yeah, some of our cells are dying off, and within 7 years, every single cell in our body is no longer there. So I just want to, I like to point that out because we feel like these rejections are forever, right? And there are, and I will say, I have friendships that ended over 20 years ago that still feel fresh and hurtful for me. And I have friendships that I've had for 35 years that feel like the best thing, the best gift, most myself with them, right? But to know that you're a new person, like literally head to toe a new person every 7 years, it just gives me so much openness to who can I become and what can my friendships become, who can I know 7 years from now that I can't even imagine right now. So if I would have continued to stay in friendships that were meant to end, I wouldn't have any of the relationships I have now. And I really want to underline this because at the time I had 4 or 5 good close friends from high school, wonderful people, still love them to death. But today, right, I know 300 to 500 women from all over the world who are doing incredible things through coaching and other restorative healing that I only pursued coaching because I had a lack for the personal connections in my life, right? Like you mentioned earlier, your friend who has a baby. Like my story is I had my daughter when I was 19. None of my friends had their kids then. And then when my daughter was born, they started having their kids, right? So when my daughter got to the age where it was like, yeah, I can go wherever and do whatever, they're like, yeah, but we have kids, you know? And so even though I had these close relationships my whole life, we went through different stages and phases, and it was hard to stay connected. And it was really easy to go to the place where I was like, well, I don't have any friends. No, actually
Yeah.
wasn't true, but like letting go of some specific friendships that were not for me and were not for them allowed me to be in the place. And I hope it allowed her to also be in the place where she is able to have deeper, more meaningful, more connected relationships. We have this real sickness about longevity in this country. And I mean, maybe more widespread than that. But I mean, I think this was really helpful for me too. Like when my marriage ended, I was able to go like, I was really putting a lot of merit on longevity, and I wasn't really paying attention to a lot of the other metrics. And I will never do that again. Like I will from now on measure my relationships and like how radiant do I feel, not how long have I
Mm.
been in them. And I
Yeah.
encourage you to do that with your friendships as well. So
Yeah. 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 It's so good. Rochelle, I hope if you don't want to answer this, I can cut it. But do you think that maybe like, and not that the emotion couldn't be there, like the wound couldn't be there, like, but do you think that some of those past relationships, because you mentioned like learning these tools recently, if you will, do you think maybe those like past friendship breakups or things that happened, do you think they became really painful because of maybe stories you had around them? So,
oh, for sure,
yeah.
100%. I believed that this person didn't like me because I wasn't worthy.
Yeah.
Right. And I didn't know that's what I was thinking. Right.
Yeah.
But I know now that my wounds have to do with worthiness, right? So even when somebody gets like having an adult temper tantrum, right? Like there are people in my life who will have an adult temper tantrum, and I'm like, this person does this because this person doesn't like me. And when I voice this out loud to somebody else, they're like, I don't think so, right? Like I think that
Mm-hmm.
has to do with this person's inability to have emotional maturity. Like they can't say I'm feeling shame or disappointment. They're just like, right? And I'm like, this person hates me and this person hates me because I'm, again, not consciously. Like I walk around thinking I like myself, I like who I am, I like what I do, I like all of these things. But that underlying wound always comes up if somebody has behavior that does not match my expectation. My why behind my why behind my why behind my why is always like, that person doesn't like me, and it's
Yeah.
because I'm not good.
Do you feel like you with that's like a amygdala lizard brain emotional reaction, and then like you come in after that too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, I mean, I had a couple of situations. Like I had a situation when I was in fifth grade. This is the first time I shared this on a podcast. I've shared it a couple other times, but the whole entire class stopped talking to me in fifth grade, halfway through the year, and all through sixth grade. And I didn't get any new friends until I was in junior high. The only reason I got new friends is because we switched schools. And I share that story, and somebody was like, oh, that is definitely trauma. And I was like, well, because I'm comparing my hurt to other people's hurt. But what she was saying is like, that was long lasting. That was a disruption. It was a confusion. You had no explanation, right? And my brain was just like, people don't like me. And this is just who I am. And then even like when I started getting friends, the first time was like I was at a summer camp in between junior high and high school, and I was in a tent with four other girls. So sets of five is probably not a great idea for high school kids anyway, but because we usually pair up with one or two people, right? But the girls didn't talk to me that whole like 3 days long, right? Maybe we're there for 5 days. The girls didn't talk to me for like that whole first half of the week. And then like towards the end, they're like, you're really cool. We really like you. We didn't think that you would be. We thought that you were going to be a bitch because you're so pretty and cool and like, so even then when I started to be in situations where people didn't know my old narrative, the first thing was like, we thought that because of the way that you looked that you were going to be this, and we decided we
Mm.
didn't like you. There's I do think there's some wounds, again, or if I'm going to go back to energetic, there's some wounds that are not even mine. They're so old, they're ancestral, that I don't even know the stories to.
Yeah.
And we all carry that. If you don't know about that, look up epigenetics. We actually carry wound and hurt in our body from 8 to 12 generations ago. And I think that's really important for us to know, especially the history of our country, knowing different marginalized groups. I think it's really important for us all to make awareness of that.
Yeah.
And that's true for all of us, right? It's true for all of us. And no human leaves this world without pain. And so if we don't have tools and coping mechanisms to shake it off, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's really helpful uh, to hear, especially because, and thank you for sharing too, like sharing your stories, because you're so right. So many people, like, I have those rejection stories. Everybody listening has like a rejection story, probably more than one. If they have been on this earth and not living in the woods by themselves, they have like some kind of rejection stories. And so, but I think too, it's part of that that makes people so afraid of connection with other people. So I really appreciate you sharing that and explaining, like, also too, like how things have helped you for like past hurts that you have, and how you're able to like bring that in now. I think one thing that you said that was really powerful, and what kind of came up for me as you said it, is that, oh, like when I experienced this, you said, and it was so subtle, so people might have noticed it, but, or might not have noticed it, but you said, like, that's that old thing. And you're giving yourself again that soft acknowledgement, that permission to have your feelings. You're not making it wrong.
Brene Brown will say, like when you share your stories of shame, light comes into them, and shame needs darkness to be able to grow. And what was so beautiful about this trip that I was on, where I was like sharing the story, and then everybody had a story, and then it was like, see how painful I feel my story, and how I'm empathetic about their story, but I'm not like, and again, lighter and lighter and lighter over the years do I feel around these. So I just want to say, like, you might always have pain around it, but it's not going to be the same. And I really have adopted, like, on purpose, this idea of like, life only ever gets better. Like, bad things happen, but I know for sure, because I am aware, what do I want my life to look and feel like? Who do I want my friendships? What do I want my relationships to look like? Because I know with intention and purpose, I'm creating that. I 100% know life is only going to continue to get better and better for me. And I know that's true for you too. Anybody who's listening.
I love it. I love it. All right, so let's make sure we get to another story. I'm going to pick one that's not a novel and a half. So here we go. And this one is kind of money related, not super money related, but it's coming from the best of Redditor updates, and it's 3 months old. Would I be the asshole if I rescinded my offer to pay for a friend's birthday dinner after they picked somewhere I can't eat? My friend Luke is turning 40, and I offered to pay for him and a group of friends to have dinner anywhere Luke wanted. Luke knows I've been vegan since my 20s, and it's never been an issue before. When I asked where he made reservations, he said a local barbecue place that is famous here for having a menu that mocks people who don't eat meat. Literally has a section that says, vegetarian options, don't let the door hit you on your way out. I asked what he expected me to eat, and he got huffy and said, well, it's his birthday, so it shouldn't matter. I should eat before getting there and just order drinks while everyone else eats and still enjoys everyone's company, etc. This sounded miserable to me. I had zero expectations of Luke picking somewhere vegan friendly. Hell, I expected him to pick a steakhouse, and even that I would have been fine with a salad and some sides. I didn't expect him to choose somewhere that prides themselves on meat being in every single dish on the menu. I want to tell him never mind and buy him a traditional gift instead, but I feel like a massive asshole for taking back my offer, so I don't know what to do, to be honest. Edit to add, this is a group of 9, so I'm also feeling miffed about spending 300 plus on a meal that I can't eat. Second edit, the exact text I sent to this was, hey, I want to take you and the friend fam out to dinner for your birthday. Make a reservation somewhere and let me know. What do you think, Rochelle?
I think the real question is, like, how do you want to feel when giving this gift? Because if you're committed to giving it and you're going to feel resentment while doing, maybe this is just me, but I think it's better to not give at all than to give with resentment. And this is a lesson I've learned the hard way over my life. And, that's one thing to consider, right? So there's several options. You could just eat ahead of time and go and have drinks and be like, well, probably won't offer anywhere you want. Next time I offer, maybe I'll say, here's 3 options, where would you like to? It's not wrong, basically, is what I'm going to say. It's not wrong for you to show up in this any way that you want, especially, I'm just going to say this, it's a little bit odd that this person knows that you're vegan and has chosen a place that says, like, don't let the door hit you on your ass on your way out. And also just come and have drinks. You can do with that what you will. It's fine if you decide to just suck it up and do it. But I would just say, if you choose to suck it up and just do it, Don't do it out of resentment. Don't do it out of like, I don't want to be an asshole. Don't do it if you're like, this person is an asshole, right? Like all of that energy shows up. So I have a friend who is a weight loss coach, and she is a weight loss coach for people who are like, who love food. You know, they're like foodies. And she taught me this thing that I think is phenomenal. But she's like, the food is a waste if you eat too much and you feel miserable, or if you leave it on your plate. Like either way, right? So when we're thinking about like, is it worth the money? It's very much open to interpretation, right? You could just choose to do it, choose to like your reasons and do it, choose to not do it and change the way that you show up in other situations in the future. Or like, I mean, anything in between, but just like be really sure that you know and understand your reasons for it. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I really agree with you a lot. Like, how do you want to feel when you are giving this gift is a good question. I do think, and this is small, and we do not need, like, I am huge on we're always going to have something that we could quote unquote do differently in a social situation because social situations are not tests where we get A pluses, we get graded. Social situations are like fluid, and everybody truly has a different opinion on what's like quote unquote right to do. So, that being said, I do wonder where this came from, if you will, because I mean, I agree with you. I do think the friend, it was interesting that they were picked a place that literally said, like, don't let the door hit your ass or whatever on the way out. Which is, this story is also really funny because I am a vegetarian, by the way. So that is really funny. But I think it's interesting because this friend could not have like malicious intent and could literally be very aloof and not think about it and just be like, oh my gosh, I, especially like this guy's name is Luke. And this isn't true for all guys, but I have noticed sometimes they don't always, like, women are taught to like be kind and like socially welcoming all of the time. So we think like, oh, is right, is Kelly going to be able to get the night off with her kids to be able to come to this, or should we choose a different night? And well, is this person like, we think of things like that. So it's really interesting. I don't know. He could be really aloof, and I'm not giving him like, that could be not true. That also could, it's not an excuse. I don't know, in a way, but he could be very aloof. Regardless, he could be very aloof. And if he is, and it was just like, oh, I'm really excited to try this place, so I want to go here, and I didn't even think about it. I think what may have happened maybe is that the friend was like, oh, but I can't eat there. And then the friend was like Luke was just like, well, you said for my birthday. Like maybe got like defensive on it because he was like, I don't know, like just wasn't very open to seeing the whole picture. Like I really don't think it has to be like that deep. You know what I mean? However, I do think like it depends too, like that person, not that you have to like police yourself and your reactions, but I do think that maybe he was put on the defensive because it was like, I can't eat there. Like I'm not going, or like I'm not doing that. And then he was like, well, it's my birthday. I don't know. Maybe that's something that happened. Like I think it may have been a little bit differently if the communication was like, what about a steakhouse? Can we change it to a steakhouse? Maybe. And who knows? Maybe Luke is a brat, or not a brat, but has maybe Luke has bratty tendencies, and he's like, no, I really want to go here. Regardless, I think it may have been that OP felt really good about giving this gift before it was like, oh, I can't even like eat there. And I also think that's okay to say, like, I really want to like spoil you, but and have you feel good. Like, I really want to pay, but I also really want to make sure I can eat with y'all. And yeah, to have that kind of conversation. But let's see, we do have an update. So it's interesting. I guess my overall opinion of this is I would like see if we could like dig in a little bit more with the communication and with the conversation with Luke and come from a very connectively collaborative place. But I also think as well that at the end of the day, regardless of like Luke's behavior, OP can decide how they want to feel about it. So the update is, hey folks, this may not be the dramatic update y'all wanted, but here we go. First, to clear some things up, many of the comments assumed I was a man and Luke was trying to emasculate me somehow. I am a 41-year-old woman, and our friend group that was invited are 4 women and 6 men. 4 of those people are spouses, and the other 6 of us have known each other since college after living in the same academic focused house senior year. An off-campus housing option where people who share a concentration can apply for and live in standalone houses off campus that are university owned. That's really cool.
That's cool. Sounds like an
That's a
awesome
story.
friend group.
Yeah, that sounds so fun. After deciding to just cancel and take a break from my friendship with Luke, I got a text from our friend Susan letting me know Luke told everyone where we were going to eat. And without prompting, got several texts back along the lines of like, hilarious, but where are we really eating? Without any drama, I guess Luke realized he made a mistake, and I got a text later in the day saying he was sorry and he decided to pick a different spot. Luke has always been a bit oblivious with bad social cues, and I'm bad at confrontation, so it was a bad mix. Dinner was last night. It went great. Everyone was making fun of Luke for the initial choice, but he took it in stride, and we all had a great time catching up and being away from our respective kids for the night. And then they go, sorry for the boring update. But I think this is great. And I think we could see that he maybe was a little aloof, and that's why that connective communication could really come into hand. Because I love to tell clients, like, because a lot of times my clients are women, and then they are overgivers. They overextend themselves to quote unquote like be nice or be a good friend. And so I like to tell them to ask themselves the question of, will you love the follow through of this, or do you just love the idea of it? Do you just love the idea of doing this action, or are you going to love the follow through of it?
Yeah, and again, I love that it's like wrapping back up to that same point, that or the quote that's like, between what is said and not meant and
Yeah.
what's meant and not said, right? Because like not meaningful, he booked a reservation at a place where the person who was paying couldn't even eat, and then not wanting to say because she didn't want to be confrontational, right? Like imagine like a friendship could have truly ended over that, depending on what different people's triggers and activations are.
Mm-hmm.
And what's so cool about this, it sounds like a very cool friend group, because they were all like, yeah, we're not going along with that. Like she and then they were able to like rib him, and he was able to like change his mind. And again, this, I'm just going to be like completely frank and upfront here. This is my activation showing, right? I was just recently at a dinner where somebody bought everybody's meal and did not want to, and made a big scene and said out loud that they didn't want to buy everybody's dinner. And it feels terrible to be on the receiving end of a gift that doesn't want to be given, right? So
Yeah.
just like a couple of things here, right? I'm acknowledging my own triggers and activations. And also, I'm answering from this perception of, what does it feel like on the other end? Even if you never confront, if you don't actually energetically want to give, I personally think it's better to rescind than to give with resentment.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. And we can have connective communication, and that's something actually too that might be a really good topic for us, is like connective communication, and having like the tough conversations. But this was so good, and I appreciate you too, like sharing like that story and everything, because it also like all of us are coming from different kind of perspectives, right? It's so good. When you said, "Oh, a friendship could have ended over this," so true. Our friendships are way too fickle. They really are. They take so much like investment to really build up, like to move somebody, if you will, like really up our triangle. That takes a lot of investment. And to end it like so quickly over, like you said, a miscommunication, or like I that happens way too often, and it's part of the reason why so many of us are really lonely, and we just really need to be aware of that because we wouldn't do that in our partnerships where we've invested a lot. We would have the uncomfortable conversations with our partners, right? I cannot
Hopefully.
imagine. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, you're right. You're so right. For yeah, but I do
We're
think it's
life
been
coaches, so we know, but like
yeah.
I was telling somebody recently, like, it's so much fun to date as an adult. And then I was like, actually, it's probably the life coach tools that makes it fun, right? But go ahead with your
Yeah.
story. Yeah.
No, I do think it's a normalized though to like have conversations with your partners, like on some level, like about stuff like this. And we don't with our friends. And we really need to do that, honestly. Like we really need to be like, oh, I can talk to this person about this and it's going to bring us closer, or like I'm going to get even clearer about the relationship. That's what it'll do every single time. If you're really coming at it from a connective place and like communicating with somebody, which again, I think the theme for this is not actually expectations. I think the theme for this is truly like, am I going to be rejected in this friendship? Right? Like friends rejecting because, yeah, that's like
And
so what happened.
that part where you said, my gosh, I just lost it. It doesn't need to be perfect, right? We have this idealism of relationships like just happening, right? Like, what's the most romantic story? Like, oh, we just met and fell in love and everything was just happily ever after. Or our friendships are just the best when nobody has to explain anything. But true intimacy comes from that fumble when somebody actually does touch a wound, and we
Mm-hmm.
can show up and say, hey, not that I need you to do anything differently, but I want you to see me. I want you to understand this is a wound and this is why it's important to me. Right? Like
Yeah.
that is the place where we let our darkness into the light and begin to be able to like apply some balm and be able to like change.
Yeah, that you're so right. That is really what makes connection, is because if things are just like great all of the time, you're not experiencing like honestly a huge level of vulnerability, which is like I'm an imperfect human, we have a disagreement. You're an imperfect human, we have a disagreement, and then we know that we're going to come together. We know that we're going to be okay. Like that's like a huge chunk of connection that honestly so many of us are missing. Like a huge level of vulnerability is like to know if you have a feeling, you're going to talk to me about it. If we have an issue, we're going to be okay. Like that's like a level of security, trust, connection. Again, it's so good. Um, all right, Rochelle. Well, I've taken up so much of your time already. Thank you so
Can I
much for
share
coming
one
on.
thing with you, Jewel, before we go? Because you asked me a question
Yeah.
when we started about when was the last time I felt connected. And
Oh
I wanted to share this
gosh.
because it was a really cool experience that I had today. So
Please share.
I went to a peer coaching get together. So just imagine there was like a group of like 4 or 5 of us, and we're on a Zoom call. And the woman who was leading it prompted with, what is it you want to be acknowledged for most? And who do you want to acknowledge you? And I want to offer to give you that acknowledgement. So then she role played out the acknowledgement. So each person went around and was like, I really want to be acknowledged for all the plates that I have spinning, and that I keep all the plates spinning at home, at work, on these, right, like all these other places. And so then I asked her, like, can I role play that for you, since she was the facilitator? She was like, oh, that would be amazing. So then I was like, who do you really want to hear this from? And then she told me it was her husband. I asked her, like, what does he call you? Does he call you by your first name, or does he have a sweetheart name for you? And then I was able to like role play out for her and give her the acknowledgement that she most wanted. And then we all went around the room and everybody shared and what they most wanted to be acknowledged for. And then somebody stepped in and role played for them. And it was the most beautiful, heartfelt experience. I mean, all of us in there, I think, were completely filled up from that. So if you have a friend group that you can like possibly even 1 or 2 people that you can try this with, I highly recommend it. It's a great connection tool / exercise.
Yeah. No, that's so good. I want to start a group, so maybe I'll have the group do that at some point. Absolutely. That's so beautiful. And thank you for reminding me of that and bringing that up, because I definitely wanted that to be at the beginning of the episode and I just like jumped right in. But we're new, we're fumbling, we're getting in the groove, and I'm so glad you shared that because it was so beautiful. Um, so Rochelle, where can everybody find you if they want to check out more of your work?
Yeah, so I'm on RochelleCP.moneycoach on Instagram, and Rochelle CP Money Coach on Facebook, and RochelleCP.com is my website. And I would really encourage you to go there and sign up for the Fun Money Guide, where I just talk about like all the ways that we make money, routines, and habits feel like loving self connection, right? Like loving connection to ourselves and to our money. And so there's a fun like money playlist in there, and I like share some of my favorite books and stuff. But it's a great way to connect with me, follow me, see what's this whole thing about.
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. And we will have all of those links in the show notes for everybody for ease because we love that. But Rochelle, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And I can't wait to have you back.
I can't wait to be back. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining me on the Socially Delightful podcast. I'm Jewel, and I'm truly so grateful that you came and hung out with me today. If this podcast meant something to you, it would mean so much to me if you left me a review so that way I could keep making content that you love. And if you really want to make my whole day, share this podcast to your Instagram story and tag me at Connection with Jewel so I can shout you out. Or send me a message and let me know what resonated with you or what you want to hear next. And I'll see you at the next episode.